pleased to tell you today that I have Steve Forbes, yes, the Steve Forbes from Forbes Media with me here today, and we're going to have an interesting conversation. So Steve, thank you for joining me today.
Dawn, thank you.
We had an interesting afternoon. You spent time with us and went to all of our executive roundtables. How was the afternoon for you?
It was stimulating. You always get brainstorms when you have smart people together. Ideas come up, insights come up, and I think the roundtable at the end brought it all together. Nobody fell asleep on that one.
Nobody.
So that, I think, is a tribute to people's keen interest in learning more.
That's good. You had some great comments today. So tell me a couple things we want to talk to you about. We know the markets hate uncertainty, and we've just recently had the tsunami and the earthquake in Japan. How do you think the global markets are going to react to that?
Well, the uncertainty certainly has slammed equities in Japan and has had some aftershocks, you might say, in U.S. markets and global markets. But the key thing is, I think most people are waiting to see what in the world is happening with those reactors. The human toll is horrific, much higher than what was originally indicated. And now we have the reactors as well. So yes, it has slowed things down.
Yeah. So you're a media mogul, and so I'm looking for some advice from you. How can we change the conversation about outsourcing? Right now, outsourcing is demonized. It's a bad word. It's out there. It's used by politicians as part of their platform. And we all know we outsource things in our life every day. Companies have outsourced their cafeteria service, their janitorial service. And yet, when we say outsourcing, we're talking about net job elimination. We're talking about destroying economies. So how could you help me to make outsourcing not a bad word and have people understand it better? How would you put it in your terms?
Well, people have outsourced since the beginning of time. There's no way you as an individual can provide all your wants and needs. So when you go out to the grocery store, you've outsourced the food to farmers and to truckers to deliver it and private companies to process it and grocery stores to make it convenient for you to buy. Same thing when you buy a purse, same thing when you buy clothing. You have outsourced those tasks to others. So you can focus on what you do best, your value added, what Adam Smith called the division of labor. And that's what outsourcing is about. So you take something like an iPhone, numerous parts from around the world. It's assembled in China. Parts come in from Japan, which is one reason why Apple's stock took a hit. South Korea, Germany, U.S., and other places brought together, sent to the U.S., $178 worth of parts. 10 of those $778 of parts come from the United States. The United States takes those parts, sends them to China. China puts them in the iPhone, sends them back to the U.S. So it's simply writ large an economy where there is a huge division of labor, where people make various things and they're all put together, and we benefit from that. Again, there's no way a single individual could make an iPhone, so it involves a global system to do it. So outsourcing is having others do things that you can spend your time better doing other things than those particular things.
So how should we craft the conversation then? Should we not call it outsourcing? Should we change the terminology? How do we keep, we're going into an election year, and people are looking for platforms. How can we keep it out of the politicians?
Well, I think it's just explaining. It's like a team. The pitcher has outsourced the catching to the catcher, has outsourced the shortstopping to the shortstop. And so, again, it enables people to do what they do best and not having to do things that others can do better for them. And yes, sometimes their jobs may be so-called outsourced overseas, but those jobs would have ultimately disappeared anyway. For example, railroads, one of the biggest employers in this country after World War II, 1.2 million workers. Today, railroads employ about 170,000, 180,000 workers, carrying 6 to 8 times as much freight as they did decades ago. Those jobs did not go to Bangladesh, Korea, China, Vietnam. They just disappeared because of changes in technology. So the key thing is focusing on how do you get an economy to grow, how do you get an economy to create new jobs, ultimately better paying jobs. We've done it for 200 years. I don't think we're going to lose the knack for it now.
Let's hope so, not anytime soon. So one of the conversations we had in one of the roundtables today, we were talking about globalization. And you alluded to the fact that until we get our monetary markets balanced or in sync, we won't have true globalization. Can you expand on that a little bit for me?
Well, commerce is made easier when you have a common currency. Imagine in the United States if each state had its own currency, the New York dollar, the Florida dollar, the California dollar. It would be highly inefficient, and we wouldn't have near the standard of living we have today. So when you go from the border from Florida to Georgia, you don't have to worry how, do I convert my Florida dollars and how much will it cost to Georgia dollars and stuff like that. So too in a global economy, where you need a global currency, not in the sense of a supernatural central bank doing it, but the dollar linked to gold. We did it in the 19th century, early 20th century, when the British pound, which was then the big currency, was linked to gold. Dollar's been linked to gold since our founding with Alexander Hamilton and George Washington from the 1790s. The link was ruptured in the early 1970s, and we've been paying the price for it ever since in terms of potential currency wars, uncertainty, bubbles. We've never had as many currency crises, financial crises in the last 30 years as we have had. Any previous period, there's nothing really, except for the Depression, which was government caused, has come close to it. So that kind of constant turmoil is very disruptive politically and economically. So the dollar has to be stable in value. It's like 60 minutes in an hour. Imagine what your workday would be like if the number of minutes in an hour changes each day. 60 one day, 32 the next, 98 the next. You'd soon have to have hedges, derivatives, futures to figure out how many hours you're working. You want to hire somebody for $15 an hour, 20 bucks an hour. Well, is it a US hour, an Australian hour, Canadian hour, Florida hour, Bangladesh hour? You don't know. So the key thing, again, is having a stable measure makes life much easier. You think you're traveling a mile, 5,208 feet. Imagine if that changed, 4,000 feet one day, 5,000 the next, 7,000 the next. No, make it easy. We've got enough things to worry about.
Yeah, we sure do. So in a recent issue of your magazine, you had Intel's CEO, and he was quoted, and he said, in a given year, 90% of what I sell in the month of December are products that I wasn't even offering in January. So that speaks to the speed of innovation. But in a westernized society and the way we are today in the United States, do you think we can actually compete on innovation with Eastern companies?
The answer is, in terms of innovation, absolutely. The key thing the United States has had is well-established capital markets, which some of the politicians are trying to upend, have for the last 10 years, the rule of law, a sensible tax code, a culture that encourages entrepreneurship, does not stigmatize you forever if you fail, as some other cultures do. The United States has enormous advantages. When we don't do well, it's because of things that are standing in the way. In the 1970s, it was government printing too much money. In the last decade, the same thing. So if we get a stable dollar, simplify our tax code, and allow free enterprise in healthcare, you'll see this economy take off like a rocket. And other economies have yet to demonstrate their ability to adjust to changing circumstances. Every economy at one point hits the wall. The question is, how do you respond to it? Japan has had a stagnant economy, very slow growth for 20 years. They haven't been able to make those kind of adjustments that we take for granted. So yes, the U.S. can innovate.
So in your recent book, though, you do have the discussion that if you're in a non-capitalistic society, there are so many forces, whether it be repression or different reasons why you won't be able to innovate. Do you believe that innovation will only come in a non-capitalistic environment, or excuse me, in a capitalistic environment?
Innovation, yes. Countries can copy what others have done. The Russians tried it under communism. Some are still trying it today. But in terms of a number of advances, in terms of a critical volume of advances, yes, you need free markets, because if you come up with something, you want to be able to put it out there, see if people respond to it, which means you have to have free-floating prices so that you can see what do people want and what people don't want, and have an environment where you don't punish people who succeed. Most new companies fail. Most new products fail. If you don't have an environment where you can find out what works and doesn't work, it doesn't move ahead. China, for centuries, has come up with inventions like gunpowder, compasses, and the like, but because they repeatedly closed their society off, they stagnated, and the West moved ahead because they didn't have those kind of obstacles. Well, China's now been opening up. It's been booming, and the key thing is, can it create a society, environment, constant environment, where that innovation can take place and not have that kind of closing off as they've done in previous periods of their history.
So you spent a lot of time today with a number of C-level executives, and we had a number of CPOs. So the office of the Chief Procurement Officer, first off, didn't exist 10 years ago. We didn't have CPOs. But procurement was always seen as a sleepy back office function. It was an overhead function. Has that, after spending time with folks today, are your thoughts about the office of CPO different from where they might have been 10 years ago?
Well, once upon a time, procurement was seen as buying things and getting a good price. So you put out competitive bids, essential but pretty routine in essence. Now procurement today, you're going across potentially numerous national boundaries, numerous services that you wouldn't have thought of putting out for bid or buying, you're now doing because you want to focus on your core competencies. So it's become much more complex. It's not just picking up a phone and making an order. That's kind of quaint now. It is immensely more complicated because the global supply chain has become immensely more complicated. So, you can go to numerous countries now, thanks to the internet, bringing technology to your fingertips. The whole world is at your fingertips. So yes, it has become much more complex.
So, cloud computing. I would say even 6 months ago at our last summit, we were talking about cloud computing, and people were all having different definitions of it. And some people thought it was just a marketing word, another hype. Where do you see cloud computing? Do you see that?
Well, it's anything but a marketing hype.
Now we know. Now we know the realities of it.
Yeah, and people like the idea that you can carry something around and be able to access massive amounts of software data and not have to lug it around with you. And so, yes, it is immensely convenient. And the challenge, of course, is as you get with these advances, is security. But there's some breakthroughs there in terms of technology to keep ahead of the bad guys. So yes, it's enormously advantageous to have something where literally no matter where you are, you can access what would have taken 1,000 mainframes to store in times past.
Absolutely. So I'm a CPA by trade. I don't know if I've shared that with you. So I know 20 years ago when I was actually practicing, the concept of a flat tax scared me to death because you wouldn't need a CPA. Anyone can multiply.
It's nothing personal, my advice.
And you've made it clear you're not running in 2012. So the flat tax, now that I'm not a CPA, I think it's just an incredibly marvelous idea to simplify the tax code. Do you think we'll ever get there? And if so, how long will it take?
I think we will get major tax simplification. It will be an issue in 2012. You got a little taste of it with the President's Commission on Deficit Reduction, which so far he's ignored, but they made their bipartisan report in December. And they all agreed on tax simplification. Now, they didn't advocate a flat tax, so they're not quite there yet. But Democrats and Republicans signed on to it. Take the governor of California. Jerry Brown is a flat tax advocate. So I think after 2012, during 2012, it will be an issue. And after 2012, there will be a mandate. We must drastically simplify the code, and I think that opens the way to a flat tax.
But we've discussed simplifying the code. I mean, everybody says we don't need regulations this big. The tax code is voluminous and it changes. Why haven't we gotten there yet? What's been our impediment?
There haven't been candidates who've advocated. I did in '96, but since then it's not been there. Now they're going to be advocates in 2012 because you have a number of people who are going to be running on the Republican side. They're all going to be jockeying for advantage. People in the Tea Party and elsewhere want it. They know the current code is a source of poisonous corruption. So simplification is going to be for first and foremost. One of the key issues in 2012 is a way of getting this economy back on its feet. I think Democrats are going to, smart Democrats are going to sign on to it as well. Why leave all the fun to Republicans? And independents are certainly in favor of it. So it cuts across all lines, whether it's gender, racial, religious, whatever. People know this current code is a monstrosity, and we've got to get rid of it.
So when we get the new government in place in 2012, what do you think the first things they're going to attack? Will it be the tax code? Will it be, what do you think is going to be the burning bridge that they're going to have to, or the burning platform, that they're going to go after?
Well, you don't know what the crisis of the day is going to be, but in terms of an agenda, yes, simplifying the code will be right out in front. Also, I hope stabilizing the dollar and entitlements. I think people will be ready for entitlement reform in 2012, so you're going to hear a lot of talk about that. And certainly on the healthcare side, the key thing is bringing genuine free markets into healthcare and effective safety nets, neither of which we have today.
No, absolutely not. So Steve, I know you've got a full agenda, and I want to thank you for your time today, and I just really appreciate all of your insights, and your stories today were phenomenal. I have to tell you, every minute I was engaged, and it's like, oh my gosh, another story and another fact, another historical fact. You are an amazing man. So I just want to thank you for your time.
Well, Dawn, you're amazing, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you for joining us today. I'm Dawn Evans, and I'll see you next time.